Because the northern Nigeria you're talking about, that has spent more time in power than any other part of the country, today is the most dangerous place to live, probably in the world, the most impoverished part of the world. It is.
Hello, what's up guys? In this video, we are diving into one of the boldest and most shocking statements ever made about northern Nigeria, and it's coming straight from a respected Hausa elite himself. Now, listen carefully. He said, northern Nigeria today is probably the most dangerous place to live in the world. Not just that, he went even further to call it the largest human slaughter slab in the entire world. Let that sink in for a moment. According to him, no part of the world, not even Gaza, has seen more killings than northern Nigeria right now. He described it as a region drowning in fear, poverty, and endless bloodshed. And here is where it gets even more shocking. Pointed out that northern Nigeria, despite spending more years in power than any other region in the country, has become the most impoverished part of the world. He didn't stop there. He explained that our political system, especially the kind of majoritarian politics we play, has completely failed the north. It is the same pattern, he says, that once made the British use the northern half of the country to dominate others. But after more than 65 years of independence, he asked a haunting question: what have we gained? His words were heavy. You cannot run a country along sectional lines. The center will never hold. It has never helped anyone. Then he drew a disturbing comparison to Sudan, a country that once followed a similar path of domination and division. He reminded everyone that Sudan ended up in 2 civil wars, and even now, the same Arab Muslims who once dominated others are at war among themselves. His warning was clear. If Nigeria continues on this path, the story could end the same way. But then his tone changed slightly. He called for reflection. He said the lesson here is simple. If we cannot live together as one, then the same hatred that divided us will consume us all. He went on to say that whether it is Hausa, Fulani, Kanuri, or any other tribes in the north, these divisions are destroying the region from within. He called on Nigerians to begin to dissolve these differences into a common need. And his final message, he said humanity itself should be the common ground: food, shelter, and clothing. These are the things that unite everyone, not tribe or religion. He even made an emotional point that even a lion can become a pet when shown care and attention. So why can't human beings live together in peace? Guys, this is not just another random opinion. This is a rare and fearless confession from someone who understands the north deeply, and is warning that if things don't change fast, the future could be darker than we imagine. Guys, I will let you watch this video for yourself so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Take a look, guys, and remember to share your thoughts after watching.
What keeps you up at night?
The country.
I knew it. It had to be. It had to be if I knew you well enough. But what about the country?
The fact that Nigeria is just still a country that is not yet a nation, which is at the core of Nigeria's most existential problems, be it insecurity, be it economic underdevelopment, social disorder, all of the issues we discuss about every day, that we write about, that keeps our radio stations on and busy, can be traced to the fact that as a country, we've not been able to transit in 65 years of independence from being just a collection of ethnic nationalities to becoming a nation of citizens. So I've described Nigeria severally, that Nigeria has remained a country of tribesmen whose loyalties are to the multi-ethnic nationalities that dot the landscape, and not necessarily citizens of what should have been a socially cohesive, nationally integrated, and united nation state. And if you agree with me that the most fundamental condition that precedes any form of national development and national security is the social cohesion, the national integration, and the unity of the constituent peoples of a geographic entity, without which no form of development at all can be achieved. And such an entity will remain in perpetual crisis and will always oscillate between the brinks of state failure.
Scary.
Yes.
But again, it's not rocket science, is it?
It's not.
you've been known to write about these things. Some of your earliest columns, you write for the Premium Times
And the Sun newspapers.
and the Nation newspapers. And I mean, the Daily Sun, not the Nation, the Daily Sun. And I've seen a headline or two, interesting thought-provoking pieces. And I was just like, you spend most of your time in Abuja, at the heart of the capital. And there are so many issues that, people are just juggling and all of that. Governance is never easy.
Yes.
Never easy.
Yes.
And then I personally also believe that these are, there are social constructs and stuff that are imperfect in their nature and have to be perpetuated by people with inherently imperfect states of mind, of attitudes, preferences, proclivities, and all of that. Why is Nigeria such a puzzle, though, in comparison to some other nations? Every nation has their own problems, but it looks like sometimes Nigeria just defies every convention.
That's because the fundamentals are not in place. Like you rightly pointed out, Nigeria does not only defy conventions, Nigeria defies laws. Now, Nigeria is the only country that has the capability to defy the law of gravity, given the opportunity. Because the fundamentals of nationhood is simply not there. So in some other countries, they have problems, yes, but they are not as existential as us. Nigeria is a fragile state. And that is because, again, what should hold a people together under a united umbrella of nationhood is simply not there. And this has been the situation since 1960. This was the reason why the First Republic failed and crumbled, irrespective of sometimes people now begin to fantasize about the memories of the First Republic between 1960 and 1966. The question is, why did that system fail so much that we ran far away from it and embraced the presidential system of government by 1979 and continued with it in 1999? It's because that which was responsible for the collapse of the First Republic has not been adequately addressed, even though the military tried to address it, but it was not organic enough because the political system did not absorb some of the elements and the ingredients of nation building. And so once in a while, whenever they hand over to the civilians, we resort to status quo, so to say. And until we fix that which is wrong with Nigeria, we cannot move forward. We cannot be like other nations. Yes, other nations will have problems, but it's not existential. Ours is existential. Our security challenges is existential in nature. It can break up this country at any time. Our economic problem is also existential. It's fundamental. What we're complaining of in Nigeria is hunger. Not just cost of living, it's cost of existence. Because when hunger is involved in an economic crisis, on the scale we are experiencing now, it means people are struggling to exist. If the cost of food is high, it means people are grappling with cost of existence, just to exist. Not cost of living, not rents, not healthcare, not motor insurance. That's not what we are grappling with. What ails us today fundamentally is hunger, food. We need to eat and stay alive. So it's an existential problem we are faced with on all fronts. And that is because Nigeria is like a household that is not a family. There's a difference between a household and a family. You could have children of the same parents in one household, but if there's no cohesion, if there's no unity of purpose, and they're working at cross purposes, such family will never make progress.
It becomes like an unhealthy amalgam of your willing.
Exactly. It becomes a house of commotion. But at the same time, you can have a coming together of people that are not necessarily people of same bloodline, but with well-defined ethos, and they form a family, well-bonded family, and they begin to work in sync with each other, harmonize each other's individual interests into their common interests, and go all out to achieve such interests, and they become prosperous. And I've had the argument severally too, that the reason for Nigeria's problem, the reason for Nigeria's disunity, the reason for Nigeria's inability to transform into a nation of citizens from a country of tribesmen has to do with our history. And that is why my column is actually titled Out of the Box, something similar to this podcast.
Oh, really?
Because we need to think outside of the box at this point to find solutions to our problems. And it begins with debunking some of these myths, some of these fallacies, putting our history in proper perspective so that when you urge people to embrace national unity and social cohesion, you're not urging them to commit suicide by their own perception. We are urging them to embrace life and living as it's supposed to be in the 21st century. So, for instance, it's a fallacy. Anybody who tells you that Nigeria or Nigerians or the constituent peoples of Nigeria had nothing in common before 1914, for instance, there's this popular belief that the white man came and clubbed us together. We had nothing in common. We were disparate peoples, and so that is why it's difficult. And so people are saying, for instance, it's that you create states along all ethnic lines. As we say, let us break up. We can never be one nation. And so this is a fallacy. This is actually opposite of what the reality was, because our history, our customs, our tradition, our languages, and the proximity of our individual geography suggests otherwise, and clearly shows that long before 1914, there were interrelations between the constituent peoples of Nigeria through trade, through warfare, through diplomacy, through marital ties, and so on and so forth, even beyond the current borders of Nigeria into Cameroon, for instance, into Niger, into Benin Republic, and into Chad. So in fact, the cultural commonwealth that should have been Nigeria is actually incomplete within the current space. So meaning that we have even more in common than what divides us. So for me, Nigeria is like one black African family, a largely monoracial entity with the various sectional or ethnic groups simply a plurality of the same black African family. It's like having a bird with beautiful feathers. So it's one bird, but the plumages are simply a reflection of the beautiful feathers that makes up the beauty of such a bird. That is how Nigeria ordinarily is supposed to be. And evidence abounds to suggest this. I'll tell you this for free. Some people are today identified as Southern Nigerians, for instance. We are once Northern Nigerians, long before 1914. And in Africa, unlike what we have today, in ancient Africa, unlike what we have today, Africans had a traditional system of citizenship that ensures social cohesion, assimilation, and integration seamlessly of anybody who moves from one part to the other. Something that we don't have today. Today, Nigeria still does not have democratic citizenship in its system, even though the constitution allows for that. So, if you ask me, our ancestors were more civilized than those of us that are actually their descendants today.
Wow.
Because they communicated each other more. There was no settler indigenous dichotomy 100 years ago, 200 years ago. If that was the case, for instance, Oduduwa would not have left wherever he came from. Either from Benin, as some say, either from Mecca, as some say, from heaven, from somewhere in Ife or Mala in Kogi, wherever he came from, and settled in Ife, became king, and became the progenitor of an ethnic group. He was definitely not an indigenous of Ife. It is something, for instance, for Bayajida, who was said to have come from the Middle East and founded the 7 original Hausa states and the not so original 7 Hausa states. History also shows us clearly that there was a southward movement for the old Kwara region, the Jukun Confederacy, through the Benue Valley, across the Naija, to northern part of where you have Azibo land today. And they moved freely across both Anambra State, current Anambra State, and throughout the Anioma region. You have people from northern Nigeria that have seamlessly fused across the board. They are called the Igala people, for instance. It is also a fact that Arochukwu is the point of dispersal for the Efiks, the Ibibios, and the Aros across southeastern part of Nigeria. Evidence abound about our common ancestry. And that's why our languages are very similar. The only thing is, we've not paid attention to our history enough to see the commonality in us enough for us to accept each other and understand that, look, when Azikiwe, who's from Onitsha, a part of southeast Nigeria, a part of Igbo land that traces its ancestry to Benin, partly, and another part of its ancestry to Ida in Kogi State, while the other parts of Onitsha also trace the ancestry to Arochukwu, that when he left Onitsha, for instance, and was born in Zungeru by his parents, and then he moved to Lagos to play his politics, he was simply what Yorubas would call Omowale. Because Benin Empire is ancestrally linked to the Yoruba-speaking part of Nigeria. So if a son of Benin, if a Benin man who became acculturated as an Igbo man in Onitsha and decided to come to Lagos to play his politics, he should have been regarded as a stranger, enough to cause hostility across the southern half, which led to multiplicity of other problems. And this is the situation for all Nigerians. Anywhere you are found today in Nigeria, whether you're living in the north, living in the south, living in the east, you are supposed to be accommodated as a bona fide member of the family who simply have moved from one part of the family compound to the other. And that's why I was very amused when I see people laying exclusive claim to the territory of Lagos. And I say people don't even know the history of Lagos. Lagos represents the mosaic that is the cultural commonwealth of Nigeria long before 1914. In addition to the Aboriginal Aworis and the Egun people of Badagry, you had Yoruba-speaking communities that moved into the island to trade from the neighboring environment, or you can come from the Oyo Empire. But most importantly, it's also a historical fact that the Obaship of Lagos is a progeny of the Oba of Benin. You see the mix. It's also a fact that a prominent family such as the Osho, the Tapa family of Lagos, trace their origin to Bida, northern Nigeria. And that's why they are called Osho the Tapa. Tapa means Nupe in Yoruba parlance.
Osho the Tapa.
Osho the Tapa. Now, it's interesting to know that when they talk about Muslim ticket was so rife, that President Bola Tinubu was going to run with a Muslim from Borno, I talked with that. I told people that if only you know the history of the Tinubu family of Lagos, you will agree with me that it's not only a Muslim ticket, it's a Borno ticket, and it's a Kanuri ticket. Because the patriarch of the Tinubu family is actually Malam Mahmoud Bagara from the old Kanem Borno Empire, who migrated to Lagos, married Madam Tinubu Efunre, the famous trader, who didn't give birth to a child for him though, but was allowed to marry other women and sell children that now took on her name. So the biological bloodline of the Tinubu family have their distant ancestry from the old Borno Kanem Empire, where Shetima comes from today. So Shetima and Tinubu are actually brothers, children of the same parents. But this is the truth of all of us as Nigerians. So I've also made this illustration to understand that Nigeria has no business not being a socially cohesive country, if only we realize that we're indeed essentially one people. And until we have this realization, something has gone wrong with our democracy. And our democracy is not going wrong. It's not wrong because of imperfect elections alone. There is something responsible for imperfect elections. You see, in 1960, because those who call our founding fathers failed to acknowledge this oneness and this commonality, so they negotiated from the British a country called Nigeria that was rigidly carved along ethno-geographic fault lines. So our federative units, from the regions to the provinces down to native authorities, we are rigidly structured along ethno-geographic fault lines, which gave rise to a very debilitating phenomena in a democracy: identity politics of ethnicity and religion. If there's any democracy that is caused, it is that democracy that is principally driven by identity politics of religion and ethnicity, because it's always a zero-sum game. It is a majoritarian kind of democracy. So if you have an ethnic group that is dominant in a place, it will always win an election, whether or not the contestant is qualified for the office or otherwise. And what happens is this: the reward system, and this is the most important thing about our democracy, the reward system for identity politics is usually corruption, simple and short. So when you hear, I voted for the president, I worked for him, and I was not given appointment, I was not given enough contract, I've not carried along, it means on the table where the national cake is being shared, somebody has been outsmarted or overlooked. So it's about sharing. Other international scholars, in studying Nigeria's democracy, came up with another concept in political science. It's called prebendalism. And what is prebendalism? A situation that is uniquely Nigerian, interestingly. This is almost uniquely entirely Nigerian. Prebendalism is a situation where appointive and elective political office holders have a full sense of entitlement over their sphere of government influence. So for instance, if I'm a minister today, I'm expected to use that as a reward given to me for supporting the president. And what am I supposed to do? I'm not supposed to be there to carry out any national assignments. I'm supposed to use that ministry to service my own section of the country. So for instance, if there will be an employment opportunity in my ministry, and I have 50 slots to be employed or to be filled, I'll make sure that my tribesmen get 45 of those slots. And if you complain to the president, he will not do anything, because he understands that he too, as president, has also allocated more resources to his own home state or his own home region. He knows quite clearly. So this one is like pittance, but the one that fell from the table that YouTube can also manage and go home and show. And when the next election comes, I have to go to the village and tell them, in the last 4 years, every year I bought 45 slots out of 50 for you people. That is on the basis upon which I'm going to negotiate power again for the next dispensation. So it's like a revolving door of corruption. So what has happened is that Nigeria has become less productive over time because we are now cursed with crude oil. You don't have to work as a Nigerian politician. You don't have to pass good legislations. You don't have to make investment as a state government to make money every single month. Private operators drill our oil, pay us rent, and it is shared across board. So a governor needs not lift a finger to receive an alert of between 7 to 15 billion naira, as the case may be, every single month. He needs not do nothing. He doesn't need to go to the office any day of the month for this to happen. So the contestation for these resources, this revenue coming from our mono-resource economy, has become so fierce that we now have to now deploy extraordinary means to outdo each other. That's why you see flawed election becoming a permanent feature in our democracy. That's why you see corruption being cultural in nature. AFC can only do the most they can do. It's cultural. It's like, it's a way of life. You are expected to do it. In fact, one of the most lucrative agencies in government today, people don't know, is the Federal Character Commission. Why? People are now rewarded with positions in Federal Character Commission on the basis of political patronage. So when they go there, what do? Simple. Ordinarily, they are supposed to monitor, make sure that nepotism of any kind does not happen in government agencies. But because they have interest, they have people to service too. They have nepotistic needs too, as per our identity political culture. So the first thing you do as a government agency is, if you want to employ more people in your village, just sprinkle a few slots to members of that commission. Once they get their own slots, they look the other way and give you a waiver, and you go ahead and do what you want to do. So the entire system has become enmeshed in this level of cultural corruption that is dispensed through government, that is transacted through politics, such that it's now hampering the effectiveness of the state to deliver on its primary responsibility, which is security and welfare. That's why we're having multi-dimensional security challenges in Nigeria that is becoming intractable. That is why the Nigerian state cannot take care of basic welfare needs of the citizens: employment, food security, energy security, name it. And that's why Nigeria today is exhibiting, after 65 years of this level of misadventure, Nigeria is now experiencing symptoms of a state that is failing. Because when the state is unable to meet up its core responsibility, basic responsibility of enforcement of law and order, providing basic sustenance for citizens, such a state is exhibiting signs of failure. That is where we are. And to pull the brakes and prevent Nigeria from falling off the cliff, we need to rethink this fundamental problem. And to do this, the beauty of our democracy, the beauty of constitutionalism is that it allows enough elbow room to maneuver and correct. It has a self-corrective mechanism. But the problem is, Nigerians have not even realized what the problem is. We think it is PDP between 1999 and 2015, so we tried Jonathan and PDP. Later, Buhari came, it was a messiah, but okay, Buhari was good, but the system was bad, so it's not the system. Today, we're also pointing out towards the President Tinubu. But I'm saying, yes, all of them are complicit in one way or the other, but they are simply products of a system. And for this system to be rejuvenated, we need to think outside of the box now on how to begin the gradual march towards nationhood, a nation of citizens, away from a country of tribesmen.
Pretty messed up, right?
Seriously.
How much of it might be deliberate?
I do not think it's entirely deliberate. I just think people are operating within a consciousness that they're not even aware they can ascend to a higher one. I like this, this very popular saying by Albert Einstein that you cannot solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it. The thing is, like you said, I live in Abuja. I've interacted with a lot of political officers. They don't even seem to understand why we are here and why we need to get out. They are simply flowing with the tide. You see, and that is because the political party system, which is supposed to be the brain box of Nigeria's democracy, or any democracy in the world. I say this because our constitution is not the worst in the world. Look, I'm not one of those who say they should go and amend the constitution. No. Our constitution is as good as another constitution. The problem is the failure to implement it in line with the intendment between the letters and the spirit of the law. You see, human beings, mere mortals, are not perfect in crafting their intention behind the law. But as rational human beings, you must understand why this brief statement, what it actually means deeply. You should be able to adduce a good motive to it. And that should have been the role of the political party system, where you produce men and women that can give life to the original intendment behind the Constitution, its letters, and the spirit that's supposed to guide it. The political party system in Nigeria has failed woefully. Because ordinarily, in every democracy, they always have challenges. But the political party comes to say, look, we want to change the course of our trajectory for good. Therefore, these are sets of new outside of the box thinking moving forward. All parties in Nigeria operate the same. They are simply special purpose vehicles to grab power at all costs for self-service. All of them. And when the brain box of a system is corrupted, like our political parties are, you should not be surprised the kind of leadership we've produced, political leadership. All of them play identity politics without an exception. None, not one. You see Nigerians that are very educated, also this is not even deliberate, very educated, who live in Lagos, who live in Abuja, who live in urban areas, where they pay taxes, where they do their businesses. They will leave all of this behind, and rush back to the interior, the most interior part of their homeland to go and register to member of a political party, because they want to benefit from that allocation that comes to that identity-based constituency. So you see a lot of us that are social critics, that people you think, okay, they are holding government to account. Once they get into government, something changes. It is because the system that brought them into power has dehumanized them, has taken away their innocence, it has brutalized them, so they are no longer the persons you used to know.
By the time you get to power, even you probably don't recognize yourself anymore.
Exactly, because the system, what you have to pass through to get there, it has removed all of the innocence in you completely. It has dehumanized you. It has removed every inch of morality in you, because it's not as straightforward as it's supposed to be in a liberal democracy. What is the point I'm trying to make essentially? We need to transit. We need a political party that can mobilize Nigerians away from identity politics. A visionary political party with visionary leaders with a strong mission to transforming Nigeria from a country of tribesmen to a nation of citizens. And it can be done through the political party system. First, you have to bring together a coalition of the willing, those who believe that Nigerians are one. So if you're Yoruba, for instance, if you identify as Yoruba, if you identify as Igbo, if you identify as Hausa, or whatever you identify as, but you recognize that there is a commonality between all of us, and that if I'm a Hausa man, I think that the Igbo man deserves what I deserve. And if given the opportunity, I will do unto him or her what I would want them to also do unto me, which is the golden rule of social justice. Until you have that consciousness among the group or a coalition of the willing, who cannot be mobilized to register in political parties in their places of residence, where you reside, so that your economy will not be the basis for a political transaction. So, for instance, if you're able to pull together economic interest groups, media practitioners, for example, you as a media practitioner in Lagos, your sole interest in who becomes the governor of Lagos should be whose policy is going to impact positively on our media practice. Simple and short. Not his ethnicity, not his religion, not his region of origin. But the moment you leave Lagos and go back to your state of origin, where you don't live, the dynamics will change from, it is our turn. They have been cheating us, we the Anang people. It is not the turn of the video. It is the turn of the whatever. It will change. And before you know, there are people that are experts at brainwashing you. So an intellectual giant like you will now suddenly become an intellectual Lilliput who is now taking that supper. And you carry it all through your life to the end of political career. That's the tragedy in Nigeria. This is because no political party is going to challenge the status quo. For Sudan, not one. And I've participated at several intellectual discourse, documents review, the last being at the instance of the Savannah Center in Abuja. And I said, look, our problem rise and falls on leadership. And what is the leadership recruitment process in our democracy? Political party. Something has to be done about the political party system. That's when I discovered that as far back as 2005, under the Obasanjo National Conference, that was one of the strongest recommendations. But because we don't seem to understand the role of a political party, we overlooked it. Look, in the US, bet for the formation of the Republican Party by the likes of President Abraham Lincoln, probably the Tupacs of this world, the Biggies, the Eddie Murphys, would have been born in a farm plantation in America. But somebody took a decision to say, look, I think black and white people are equal and none should be enslaved. And formed the political party. The Republican Party of America that was formed then had one major agenda on its manifesto: to abolish slavery and emancipate the black African slaves. Simple. because they have come to the realization that we need this equality to make America greater. So they went to that election. They won the election based on this campaign. And as soon as the man was elected, Abraham Lincoln, he pronounced emancipation of African slaves. It led to a war. He fought in the war, ended the war, and lost his life in the process. But that vision today, that vision yesterday, has resulted almost 200 years later into America being not just a military power, but an entertainment and sporting powerhouse thanks to its free African American citizens. So whereas America is finding it difficult to defeat China in a trade war, America has Russia to contend militarily. But America knows to defeat both Russia and China culturally. If there is one set of people that Chinese want to be like, is Afro hip hop stars. I've seen Chinese people who sang their trousers, who wear on tattoo, and they're just rapping. Because this is one aspect of American soft power that has been able to dominate the world much faster, much effectively than the military might and the economic dominance. It came from this group that was emancipated 200 years ago. That was the vision. It came through the decision of a political process. Our problems are political. It cannot be corrected by political process as well. But this time around, the political process must come from a higher consciousness. So where our founding fathers saw themselves as different, where Awolowo saw Azikiwe as an Igbo man that was different from him, and probably Azikiwe saw Ahmadu Bello as a Hausa man that was different from him, and the woman as inconceivably different from an Igbo man, we must understand today that no, we are one people. And I repeat it, one people. Look at last election in Lagos, when some people tried to prevent a particular ethnic group from voting. Something very funny happened. They prevented a lot of people who identify as Yoruba from voting because they look like Igbos. That tells you that there's no uniquely Igbo look, there's no uniquely Yoruba look. We are all Nigerians. And we can look either ways, we can look anyhow because we are one people. That is why it will take a DNA testing to fish out a child that was born into a family that was a product of an upside goal. You can't, and even you, the parent, cannot detect a child that's not, because we are monoracial. So you can't even detect. That shows you the oneness of our people. That's why it is very normal for a Yoruba man to enter into an Igbo woman and procreate, and vice versa, without any complication. There's no special surgery that is required to deliver a child from a Tataba marriage. Is there any? And because we are essentially, fundamentally, and truly one people. Our identities, whether Yoruba or Igbo, is simply shaped by our environment, our sociological interactions, and all that. It has nothing to do with any genetic codification that makes one distinct from the other. That is why if you are born to a Hausa parent in Onisha, for instance, and they don't speak Hausa to you, it is Igbo that you would hear and speak. You cannot hear Hausa automatically just because your father is Hausa. So if we want to transform into a country, it is not possible, perfectly possible, to be Igbo and Lagos, to be Yoruba and Anambra, to be Hausa and Rivers, to be Kwere and Kano, as democratic citizens of the same nation, such that what now matters, simple, is meritocratic society that can be driven by everybody's contribution. So this talk about restructuring will no longer be there, because the 44 government of Kano now belongs to all those who live in Kano, whether they're Yoruba, whether they're Igbo, whether they're Hausa. It no longer matters. Probably governor of Kano has a man that is even an Igbo man. So what's anybody struggling over, even in Lagos with Kano in terms of government? It's only on this same pedestal that you can have a situation where you say if you give 100% resource control to Naija Delta, everybody support, because in Naija Delta today, it's no longer only the Jaws, the Effiks, or the Shekis that are Naija Delta people. Everybody who lives there, Hausa, Yoruba, Ishekiri, Kanuri, name it, are now bona fide residents of Naija Delta, who are equal now fighting for this common good. So until we get to that point, we will not have started solving our existential problems. Every other thing will just be intellectual exercise that will continue to have from time to time for as long as I can see, until the fundamental issue is addressed.
You've talked about what can be done, what needs to be done. Will it ever be done? Do you have hope?
I have hope. The fact that we're having this conversation gives me hope that it may be done. It maybe not in our lifetime, but I believe with time, with such sensitization, with such outside of the box conversation about first our oneness. I remember the conversation around history being returned to school, secondary school curriculum, and I'm like, very fantastic. But what kind of history are you going to teach my child Are you going to tell him that as a man, as an Ibra speaking man from Okene, he's irreconcilably different from his friend, Ikenna, who was born to an Igbo speaking parents from Enugu? Are you going to tell him that Nigeria is made up of different tribes? Are you going to tell him that Nigerians are made up of the same people with a plurality of culture and tongues that are essentially the same? Is that which of these two variants of history are you going to tell my child? I would prefer this other one. I want my children to grow up in a country where they will see every other Nigerian, irrespective of their ethnicity or region of origin and religion, as their compatriot who deserve what they deserve, and give you the opportunity will do to them what he would want them to do unto him or her. That is the kind of nation I want the history that is going to be introduced to secondary schools to produce. And not one that perpetuates this myth, this fallacy, that Nigerians are so divided that we cannot be one nation. As a matter of fact, someone like the former Prime Minister who held on to that view for so long because he was from rural northern Nigeria, when he went to America on a state visit, he came back with a completely different opinion, where he now saw that this is possible for people of different color, not ethnicity. I keep making this point, sir, that I don't like to describe Nigeria as a diverse country. I don't think Nigeria is actually a diverse country. Nigeria is a plural country. Plurality of the same, essentially. Diversity is, even at first glance, you can see differences. So America is a diverse nation. You have people that are black from another part of the world. In the same country, people that are white from another far part of the world. And they all met people that are in between being white and black as Native Americans. So this is true diversity. And if they can forge one nation, and make it possible for you to be Somali and American, for you to be Arab and American, for everybody's right to be protected with a continuous diminution of white majority privilege. How about us that are from the same space? There is no ethnic group in Nigeria that was transpolated from another part of the world to this place. No. We all grew up here. We were all sprouted from this soil with very close proximity. Again, our history suggests that much. We are told in history that Alaafin Shongo, for instance, had his maternal roots in Bida, Shabakas, centuries ago. Yes. If that was the case, it means that we have more interactions between people in northern Nigeria and southwestern Nigeria beyond the family of the Alaafin. So it tells you that essentially we are one people. So, for example, when I grew up, I realized that what is called Ejima in my language, which is twins, is Ejima in Igbo language.
Yeah, true.
It's Ejima in Yoruba language. And I'm like, then where is this difference? I recall, for instance, that when the British government wanted to return that artifact to Benin, and they called it Okuko. It was an iron cast cockerel. There was not a controversy. So some Benin chiefs said, no, it's not Okuko that they should be called. That Okuko is an Igbo name. That in Benin, a cockerel is called Ukoko. I said, Now what is the difference between Okuko and Ukoko? It's like saying what difference between Fena.
And in Yoruba, it's Akuko.
Akuko. And I discovered that in so many other languages, it is a similar, very similar pronunciation across board. This suggests almost oneness. Nobody can tell us the origin of Akaras, a delicacy. Everybody calls it Akara. Everybody calls it Eba, Egusi soup, Ogbono. Nobody can exclusively say the origin of these foods we eat. Look at our masquerade culture across Nigeria. Look at our burial rights. Look at our marital consummation rights. Just look at it. You see a consistent thread of commonality running through. It's our chieftaincy title rights. Just name it. So essentially, if this consciousness does not return, and we now have a class of Nigerians, a coalition of Nigerians that are citizens at heart, who can look at a candidate, for instance, for public office, as I'm voting for you because of your integrity to manage my resources, your frugality to manage my resources, irrespective of ethnicity, that is the only reason I'm going to give you my vote. Until we have such level of consciousness, I'm afraid we will be a long way from where we want to be. Look at the conversation around 2027 election, for instance. It is still at subpar level. The North wants to take power back. The North is not very well under Tinubu. The South is our own. You see the polarized position. Now the question is, in today's Nigeria, who is a Southerner and who isn't? So I ask the question again, who is a Northerner and who isn't? So between Obi Kubana, for instance, who lives in Abuja, whose headquarters is in Abuja, who started this Kubana franchise from Abuja, He's an Abuja-based man. He lives in Abuja. He's my very good friend. Between Obi Kubana, whose ancestors actually came from Anambra State, southern Nigeria, and say Dangote, for instance, who lives in Lagos, southern Nigeria, whose single largest investment in the whole world is in Lagos, probably the largest taxpayer probably in Lagos. Between Obi Kubana and Dangote, who is a northerner here, who is a southerner?
Food for thought. Clearly, one person is in the north. Everything he owns is
So
in the north.
Dangote is a southerner. Obi Kubana is a northerner. So Obi Kubana should be more concerned about what comes to his region, his state of residence, and how it's going to better his economy. Dangote should be more concerned about what he's going to invest in Lagos, further going to invest in Lagos, than what he does in Kano. But again, we don't have a political process that has been able to marry economy and politics. You see, in the contemporary world, modern nation states are essentially like business entities, incorporated entities that are run by experienced CEOs so that they can make profit for both the company and for the shareholders, the citizens now. And for this to happen, you must again have social cohesion enough within that entity, national unity, national integration, to be able to compete globally for global resources. But in the case of Nigeria, because all of these elements are lacking, we are divided among ourselves and competing fiercely for Nigeria's meager internal resources, which is just less than 2 million barrels per day of crude oil. And the population is growing. Now, you know, we cannot fund healthcare. We can't fund road infrastructure. We can't fund educational facilities. We can't pay decent wage to our workers. So while other countries are making progress, engaging the world, you hear of trade talks between America is threatening countries with trade deals and all of that, and they're all threatening and trying to secure a better deal. Nigeria is lost in this whole thing. We're not. Our president also said this and that. We don't care what Trump is saying. Yeah, because we don't have any external dealings with anybody. We have crude oil. What's our business? So Nigeria needs more of a reconfiguration, an organic reconfiguration, not necessarily restructuring. Because no matter the structure you have in Nigeria, if the operating system remains the same, it will yield the same result or even worse. So between 1960, we've battled with our structure up until this moment. Because tribesmen don't obey laws, they don't obey conventions. It's simple. Yaradua was sick. The constitution spells out clearly, if you are embarking on medical vacation, hand over to your vice president. That is why it is written there. For reasons best known to him, he went on vacation. He didn't hand over until it became a big problem. That's when necessity came in and Jonathan took over. Okay, they amended the constitution and it's okay. Let us spell it out clearly that 21 days, if the president does not hand over, automatically the vice president will act. So what did Buhari do? After the first few times he handed over to Sibanjo, and Sibanjo took out some decision I didn't like, what did we see next? Our president Buhari then will travel out. When it is 20th day of his journey, he will arrive in Nigeria, take off 2 days later to continue 21 days. Now, he created a problem for us when he didn't appoint his cabinet on time. So everybody knew this was a problem. So they also amended the constitution to say, you must appoint a cabinet with this social number of days. It's not in the constitution. What did Tinubu do also? Tinubu waited until the last day of the deadline and released the list. And Lord said, they didn't say appoint, they said nominate. The semantics of, they didn't say should appoint us, what they mean. They simply say nominate. We started arguing that one. Because the law is clear. Somebody has decided to breach the intent and the spirit behind the law. And now head on to letters. They didn't say we should, they didn't say they should have been sworn in. They just said nominate. That was another argument by those who supported the government position. Whereas everybody knows that a cabinet in the presidential system of government should be in place almost from day one. Because it's just 4 years. You need to hit the ground running. So we have a way of all our laws. We have turned them upside down. Not because they are not good, because those people that are implementing it have found a way. Yes. Look at the country about local government autonomy. When I hear people talk about local government autonomy and they need to amend the constitution, it's already autonomous from 1999. It was always there. You see, as political leaders, you should be able to be entrusted with the constitution. You swore to uphold it. That means you are supposed to uphold it in its entirety and pay absolute fidelity to that constitution. It's like the father of a house. You should be able to stay at home as an adult and not steal your wife's money, even if the money is on top of the bed. and not take advantage of your house help, even you have the powers to do so. That's what makes you a responsible father figure and a leader. You don't have to go to the kitchen and steal your children's lunch. That's what makes you responsible. Nobody can force you not to do it. You can. Some fathers actually do this. So it is something with being a political leader in any country. The law will not always be perfect. It's human beings that wrote the law. If a Nigerian constitution is more comprehensive and more detailed than the American constitution, more detailed, but they uphold this in its entirety. They know the intent behind this, so they uphold it. In Nigeria, once you don't spell it out completely, they use that as a loophole to abuse the constitution. So look at what you call the local government joint account to state. There's nothing wrong with it. It simply means that the same way the federation account operates, when monies are migrated into the federation account to be shared among the theaters of government, the one that comes to local government also drops to the state joint account with local government and state. It's like having the federation account is like a joint account between the tripartite levels of government. The purpose for joint account at the state level is for the taxes states collect on behalf of the government are supposed to not be imputed into it. So if a local government going to get 100 million, and you collect taxes that are accruable to the government for 10 million, you are not going to dispense 110 million. That control that we are giving momentarily was not supposed to allow you to now withhold the fund and release only 2 million to local government and use the rest to do what you like. That was not the intent. They've held on to it to the extent that the Supreme Court has ruled on this matter. It has not been implemented. This is the first time in my adult life that the Supreme Court will rule on any matter. And it is absolutely not obeyed immediately.
Ignored.
It is ignored. Supreme Court. Because tribesmen don't obey any law. That is the reason why they are in government. It is not for public service, it's for self-service, sectional service. Until you fundamentally retweak that, reconfigure that away. Every country somehow have gone through this. But the problem is, like that's about having hope. My only hope is that we are still having this conversation at all. You are giving this platform for us to have this conversation. But again, my hope is sometimes diminished because the work that needs to go into this process, now even if it starts now, it will take us about a decade to recover from this. About a decade has not started. There's no political party in Nigeria today, none, with even a credible membership register. As bad as that. The platform that produces your governor, your president, your senator does not have a credible membership register. So when it comes to power election, it is the chiefs of the party that will decide whose name is there. So if you have registered as a party member, you're not loyal to the system, and your name is Obong Daniel in the register, and you go and vote against this establishment candidate, that day they will bring Ayo and say, Ayo, this Ayo is Obong Daniel. And if you want to put it, they will tell the nearest policeman to just bond you and put you one side until they finish the process. That is how our party system is run in Nigeria.
Then you can go to the courts.
You can go to the courts.
And we know how most of it will end up.
And because the courts too in Nigeria, our legal system, we always also argue this matter. I have had a conversation with Femi Falana over this matter over and over. There is such a thing as morality or the rule of law. Again, it is completely absent in Nigeria. Nigeria is the only country I know of, any same country where, for instance, we know of the menace of electoral malpractices. We know. I mean, every Nigerian knows, including the judges that are Nigerians, know that Nigeria has an endemic problem of electoral malpractices, electoral banditry. Yet, a case will be filed before you in court. You will now want concrete and material evidence from all the polling units where you can judge in favor of the litigant. I mean, you lived in the state, you lived in Nigeria, you saw the media reports everywhere, you saw what happened. I keep making the point that if there's one gunshot in one polling unit, it's enough to nullify the election in the entire local government. Because if I'm in my house at the end of the local government and the gunshot took place at the other end, I will not come out to vote anymore. Yeah. That's enough. But I already say you must go to every polling and prove that the gunshot happened everywhere there. And the gunshot was because of you. And the gunshot was the reason why you didn't want. Because our law is devoid of morality. And the law was crafted to safeguard morality. And when the law becomes devoid of this critical ingredient of morality, it becomes hollow, shallow, and signifies nothing, and holds no water anymore.
Does this go all the way back to hunger that you mentioned before? Because if I was a judge, a Supreme Court judge, or a judge of one of the higher courts, I would expect that I wouldn't have any other consideration other than the merits of the case, what the law says, and I'll follow it to the letter.
Yes.
Why do we have these things where even legally people do not seem to be confident they'll have redress?
How was the judge appointed in the first place?
So it's hunger.
nation to hunger, it goes back to that issue of identity I talked about. Judges are appointed by the executive arm of government. So when you elect me through the same process I've not described for you, and I become a governor or a president, and I want to appoint judges, who do you think I'll appoint? I'll appoint judges based on connection. You know what's important in Nigeria is actually corruption. It's a corruption link.
Yeah.
If I appoint you as a judge, and you know that I appointed you not because you merited, not because there's any system that threw you up. I appointed you because you are my spouse. You can see a lot of people have their wives now as judges and justices. When you appoint somebody based on any other reason but meritocratic in nature, such a person must service that system that brought him or her into power. So I am talking to a person who invaded the judicial system. People that know that all they're not qualified to go to the appeal court are in appeal court. People that know within themselves that they're not supposed to be here. People that know that they're not supposed to be at the high court, they know. But they are reloaded into being magistrates and judges because of political connection, are now servicing that system. So all it requires is, if you have a case, find out who is the control button on that particular judge. The law is an ass now, so it can point any direction.
So there is no hope, at least not anytime soon.
That's why I'm saying we need 10 years at least of political reconfiguration. Now the idea is Nigerians have been, for one thing is sure, this system is no longer sustainable, even for those in power. Because you make all the money, once you're out of power, out of favor, you go broke. You know why? You can steal 2, 3, 5, 10 billion. There is no economy to invest it in. That can bring reasonable returns on the investment. There's no power to power your factory, even if you set up one. Inflation will eat up your savings. So the only source of living is government. And government is limited. And you that are members of the class of the politicians are too many. You can only have a few ministers. At most, you have the kind of cabinet is having 50 ministers. You can't have more than that now. So out of the thousands of professional politicians that we have, only a few can get this particular patronage now. Because even the cake has been seriously diminished. So it is now time for everybody to start thinking. So for the leadership class, all of you can be accommodated on the dining table. Then for us, the other people, we are struggling with cost of existence crisis. It is now time for a convergence between the leaders that are ready to commit class suicide at this point to say, look, enough is enough. Enough is enough. Look, we can't continue like this. I can't continue to worship human beings like me because I want patronage. Have you seen where our private sector players, our big industrialists, are bound before political office holders?
True.
Does that happen in Germany? Does that happen in the US? Does that happen in UK? It doesn't happen in any liberal democracy. That is because even our private sector is an appendage of the government. So if you don't, if you're not loyal to, the only one stroke of pen can bring you down, they know. So it's like an entire system of state capture. So everybody must conform. But I'm saying it's no longer sustainable. Even for those in power and for those of us that are not in power.
But it wasn't sustainable last 10 years ago. How are we sure we will not sit down 10 years from now and still
I agree with you.
That 10 years to start
I agree with you.
calibrating?
But it has gotten worse. I'll give you an example. I lived in Lagos in the 90s and the early 2000s. I also lived in Abuja from there. If you observe, most Nigerians are not so interested in politics. In fact, when Nigeria Info started, for instance, and was on politics, we were like, who is interested in play music? I mean, do this. But today, I think Nigeria Info and other political platforms on radio have the highest listenership. If I drive in a taxi, either in Lagos or Abuja, they always tune into current affairs programs. It's no longer music. Nobody plays music anymore. You know why?
I've noticed that too.
Thank you. Then we used to play, it was more of music.
Yeah.
You see, between 1999 and 2015, the average life of a Nigerian, though not the best it could be, but it didn't degenerate so rapidly. There was still some level of stability within a threshold that allowed for people to just survive, essentially, without much effort. From 2015, it became drastically worse, such that people now realize that you can no longer sit down and not be concerned about the current happenings in your country. From 2023, it became even worse. It became like a matter of do or die. So in between, you had End SARS protests in 2020. You had End Hunger protests just about a year after President Tinubu took office. It was instructive. More instructive was that during the End Hunger protest, people were seen carrying Russian flags. Even though it was given a wrong interpretation by the authorities to say maybe Russia was sponsoring. I said, no. It wasn't Russia sponsoring the protest. Those young men in northern Nigeria, in their own thinking, believe that what has brought us to this level is the Western dictated neoliberal economic policies that forced us to move subsidy from petrol and all of that. they're now looking to go back to what they think is the Eastern Bloc. In their imagination, the opposite of what we have is what's today in Russia. In the imagination, it is like the Soviet Union, where it has a level of socialism and communism. It was simply a symbolic rejection of what we have today. Neoliberal, Western dictator policies. They simply want a new one. They couldn't define it properly, but it's an expression of their own frustration. Unfortunately, no political party has been able to sit down to read the tea leaves correctly and say, look, indeed, Nigeria needs to move from the right to the left. I keep saying that if Nigeria to get to the right destination of economic prosperity, we must take the left on. But no political party, nobody has been able to harness this discontent into tangible manifesto that can be dissolved into policy statements and point into direction. But Nigerians are ready. There is no political party or movement in the horizon that can channel this energy. So when you hear people that say they are forming coalitions coming on TV to speak, it's about Tinubu is a bad person, Tinubu is this, Tinubu is that. What are you going to do differently? Nobody has been to say one thing. Not one, nobody. Because they all belong to that same class. And they adopted these same neoliberal values because it makes governance easy for them. It's like governance without work. I mean, when you say government does not have business doing business, for instance, it simply means that the governor and the president does not have anything doing than to travel around the world looking for potential investors. And that's he will get NA mark.
And grants.
That's why he's not tilling the soil, he's not doing any heavy lifting investment, nothing concerns him and the hard work. And money comes in through allocation and overtaxes on us. That's it. No political party has been able to harness this. And this is 26 years post-transition from military to civil rule. So ordinarily, a 26-year-old man is supposed to be a young adult. That's already charting a course in life for him or herself. But unfortunately, we are still struggling. Like an adult still living in his parents' house are struggling for food from the mother's kitchen.
Yes, still in a juvenile state of mind.
Yes.
The popular maxim, which is often associated with American democracy, is it's the economy, stupid.
It is.
So we'll come back to the economy. You've said a lot, preaching unity. I was just wondering, how do you preach unity to a people, many of whom are convinced that the unity of Nigeria is some sort of a British concept of control? How do you convince them?
It's a valid thinking, again, because of the majoritarian kind of politics we play. That this idea that the northern half of the country was favored by the British demographically to dominate others. And I'm saying, even if that is true, 65 years is enough to reinvent the wheel. Because the northern Nigeria you're talking about, that has spent more time in power than any other part of the country, today is the most dangerous place to live, probably in the world. The most impoverished part of the world. It is negative on all indices of human development. As we speak, northern Nigeria today is also the largest human slaughter slab in the entire world. I don't think any part of the world has more killings going on than in northern Nigeria. Not even in Gaza. Yes. So again, it does not help anybody because you cannot run a country along sectional lines. It will never hold, the center will never hold to the benefit of anybody. It happened in Sudan. Northern part of Sudan dominated southern Sudan for so long, led to 2 civil wars and eventual secession. Where is Sudan today? Sudan is embroiled in its own civil war by the same Arab people themselves that are Muslims that have dominated others. Where is southern Sudan today? The same thing. The Nor and the Dinka tribe are daggers drawn. The lesson here is this: if you cannot live together as Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa, you are not likely to live together as Yoruba, as Igbo, and as Hausa, because the same tendency that made you think that the Hausa man is different from you is likely going to make the Jebu man think it's different from the Egba man, or the Aori man, or the Ekiti man. The same thing with the Ngwa man, and the Suka man, the Ebonyi man, and so on and so forth. The same thing with all the constituent tribes in northern Nigeria. So essentially what the world has shown us, the outside world, is that as long as the common denominator is humanity, humanism, human beings, there could be shared values, and it's universal. The common need of a man is food, shelter, and clothes. Every human, all. In fact, animals can be domesticated. Even the wildest of animals must provide shelter, food, and clothing. A lion can become a pet. Talk more of a human being. So what I'm saying in essence is we should now begin to dissolve these differences into a common need. Look, what do we really need? Basically, these are the things: prosperity. It can only come about by unity. And so, for somebody who thinks his demography is dominating others, what have you gained from it?